Amina woke up before dawn, just as she did every single day. Her body was still tired from the work she had done the previous day, but she forced herself to get up. She had no time to rest. She had no one to depend on. She had responsibilities that could not be ignored. Her hands were sore, her back ached, and her fingers still stung from the needle pricks she had received while sewing late into the night. But she got up without hesitation, because her life depended on constant movement. If she stopped, she would fall behind. If she fell behind, her daughters would suffer. Her small house was dim in the early morning light. She lit a small lamp, sat at her wooden table, and immediately picked up the half-stitched shirt she had left unfinished the night before. This was her routine. There was no holiday, no break, no slow mornings. She started stitching before the sun rose because she needed every possible hour to earn enough money. She repaired torn clothes for villagers who brought her work whenever they needed something fixed. Most paid her very small amounts, sometimes hardly enough to cover the day's food. But she accepted everything because she had no choice. Every shilling she earned had a purpose. Every shilling had to go somewhere. Food, rent, school fees, books, uniforms, and basic needs. Amina was a single mother raising two daughters, Zuri and Imani. Both girls were intelligent, focused, and hardworking. They studied every day, did their homework without being told, and understood how much their mother sacrificed for them. Amina often thought about how different their lives could be if she had received the education they were getting. She had been forced to leave school early in her childhood due to family problems and financial struggles. She spent most of her life doing physical work that barely kept her alive. She wanted something better for her daughters. She wanted them to study, to grow, to have choices she never had. Education was the only hope she saw for them. It was the only path she believed could take them out of poverty. But every month the school fees increased. They were never stable. One month the fee would rise by a small amount, the next month by more. Amina tried to keep up, but her income stayed the same. Her work never paid more, no matter how many hours she put in. She worked from early morning until late night, but it still barely covered the basics. After finishing the first shirt of the morning, she prepared the next piece of clothing. It was a very old dress brought to her by a woman who refused to throw it away. It had many tears and stains that were difficult to remove, but Amina took the job. She always took the job. She accepted whatever came her way. Clothes that smelled bad, clothes torn in multiple places, clothes that others said were impossible to fix. She accepted laundry that was too dirty for others to handle. She cleaned uniforms covered with mud. She washed blankets that were too heavy for older women to manage. She did ironing for families who simply did not want to do it themselves. People often took advantage of her situation, but she let it happen because she needed every coin she could earn. Her work caused her constant physical pain. Sometimes her fingers would swell from long hours of sewing. Sometimes her shoulders would tighten until she could barely lift her arms. Laundry days were even worse. Carrying heavy buckets of water, scrubbing clothes for hours, and drying them under the sun exhausted her completely. At night, when she finally lay down, her body felt like it was shutting down. But she never complained. She believed complaining would not solve anything. She also never waited for help because she knew help rarely came. The villagers knew she needed money, and some of them used that to give her more work for less pay. She knew it, but she accepted it. Poverty did not give her choices. She sacrificed comfort, pride, and even her health because she refused to let her daughters live the same life. She wanted them to break the cycle. She wanted them to have a future where they did not have to worry about basic survival. She continued working through the morning. When the sun finally rose, she paused briefly to prepare a simple breakfast for her daughters, usually tea and leftover bread or porridge. Zuri and Imani woke up quietly, greeted their mother, and sat to eat. They knew better than to waste food or complain. They understood their mother worked hard for every meal they ate. After breakfast, they prepared their school bags. Amina checked their uniforms, fixed any loose buttons, and combed their hair neatly. She always made sure they went to school looking clean and respectable, even if their clothes were old. She believed discipline and appearance mattered, especially for children who came from families with little money. Once the girls left for school, Amina went back to her sewing table. She stitched non-stop until midday, then washed a pile of clothes that a neighbor had dropped off earlier. She spent the afternoon alternating between sewing, washing, and ironing. She finished each task with accuracy and patience. Her income was small, but she delivered quality work, hoping people would continue to bring her jobs. By late afternoon, she felt her energy draining, but she continued working. She could not afford to stop. When Zuri and Imani returned from school, they greeted her and told her small details about their day. Amina listened while keeping her hands busy. She helped them with homework when she could, although her own education had ended too early for her to understand everything they studied. Still, she encouraged them to try their best and focus. The following day, and the day after that, continued in the same pattern. Work, exhaustion, and effort without rest. This was her life every day. But one afternoon, things changed unexpectedly. A runner from the school came to her door and told her the headmaster wanted to meet her. Amina immediately worried something was wrong. She left her work and walked to the school, her mind filled with questions. When she arrived, the headmaster sat behind his desk with a calm, expressionless face. "Amina," he said in a clear, steady tone, "if the fees are not paid by Monday, your daughters will not be allowed to attend school. There are no exceptions." That was all he said. He did not explain further because the rule was simple. No fees, no classes. Amina remained silent. She understood him completely. She nodded once, then stood up and left the office. She walked home slowly, keeping her face calm. She refused to show fear publicly. When she reached home, her daughters greeted her with smiles. She returned the smiles and acted as if everything was normal. She asked about their lessons, checked their books, and reminded them to prepare for upcoming exams. But deep inside she was overwhelmed. The deadline was only a few days away. She had barely earned enough for half the fees. She sat alone that night after her daughters went to sleep. She placed all her coins on the table and started counting. She counted once, then twice, then a third time. The amount never changed. It was too little. She tried to think of ways to earn more money in such a short time, but every idea she came up with seemed impossible. She had already taken on as much work as she physically could. She had no savings. She had no one to ask for help. She had no extra time to take a new job. The longer she sat there, the more she felt stuck. The deadline from the headmaster felt closer every time she looked at the coins. She tried to remain calm, but she could feel the pressure increasing. She knew she needed a solution, but nothing came to her. She could not stop thinking about how much depended on her ability to find the money. Zuri and Imani worked hard in school. They were both performing well, and Amina did not want their education interrupted. Losing even a few days of school could affect them badly. She tried to imagine what she would tell them if she failed to pay the fees. The thought made her stomach tighten. She did not want to see disappointment on their faces. They trusted her. They believed in her. She could not let that trust break. She stayed awake for hours, staring at the coins, rethinking her plans and searching for ideas. She knew she needed to act quickly, but she had no clear path. Still, she reminded herself that giving up was not an option. She had survived worse situations before. She had faced many challenges without support. She believed she would find a way again. But as the night passed, all she could do was sit, think, and hope for a solution before Monday arrived. Amina barely slept that night. She closed her eyes for a few minutes at a time, but her mind kept returning to the same problem. When morning came, she felt even more tired than before, but she forced herself to get up and start working again. She could not afford to lose a single hour. Monday was approaching quickly, and she still had no solution. She prepared breakfast for Zuri and Imani, trying her best to keep her face calm. She did not want them to sense the pressure she was under. They ate quietly, got ready for school, and left with their usual enthusiasm. Amina watched them walk away, and her heart tightened. She wondered if they would still be allowed to enter the school next week. She could not imagine them being sent home in front of other students. As soon as the girls were gone, she returned to her sewing table and started working. She stitched faster than she usually did, her hands moving quickly even though her fingers hurt. She took short breaks only to drink water or stretch her arms. Her goal was simple: finish as many orders as possible before the weekend. The more she finished, the more she could earn. Around mid-morning, a neighbor named Mama Kalila stopped by with a basket of clothes. She was one of the few people who paid slightly better than others. "Amina, can you finish these by tomorrow evening?" she asked. Amina looked at the basket. It was full: shirts, trousers, bedsheets. It was a huge amount of work for one day, but she needed the money. "Yes, I will do it," she said without hesitation. Mama Kalila nodded and handed her some coins as advance payment. "This is just the first half. I'll give the rest once everything is done," she said. Amina thanked her and immediately began sorting the clothes. She did not care about how heavy the workload was. She had accepted far more difficult jobs in the past. She worked straight through the morning, then started washing a pile of uniforms for another customer. By the afternoon, she had barely sat down except to sew. Sweat formed on her forehead, and her fingers were becoming numb from the work. She knew she was pushing her body too hard, but she had no choice. Every shilling mattered more than ever. When the girls returned from school, Amina was still working. They tried to help her by folding dry clothes and bringing her water. She appreciated their help, but she did not want them to worry. "Go and study," she said gently. "You have exams coming." The girls obeyed and went to their room, but Amina could hear them whispering. She knew they could sense something was wrong. Children always understood more than parents realized. That night, after Zuri and Imani went to sleep, Amina continued stitching. She worked until her eyes could barely stay open. She finished half the basket before finally allowing herself to rest. The next morning brought the same routine: wake up early, prepare breakfast, send the girls to school, work non-stop. She managed to finish the entire basket by the evening, just as she had promised. When Mama Kalila returned and saw the completed work, she was impressed. "You are very hard-working, Amina. I don't know how you do it," she said. Amina smiled politely. She did not explain how urgent her situation was. She did not want pity. She just accepted the remaining payment and thanked her quietly. When she counted the money after Mama Kalila left, she felt a small sense of relief. This amount brought her closer to the fee, but she was still short. She needed more work and more time, neither of which she had. The next day, she continued working with the same intensity. She took another sewing job, washed more clothes, and even ironed for a family that usually paid late. She accepted it anyway because she needed every possible coin. By Friday evening, she had collected a reasonable amount. But when she counted it carefully, she realized she was still behind by a noticeable gap. It was not large enough to give up hope, but not small enough to ignore. She sat at her table again, counting and recounting, trying to stretch the numbers, but they stayed the same. Saturday morning came, and she decided to visit a few houses to ask if anyone needed urgent sewing or washing done. She hated asking for work directly, but she could not sit and wait. She walked through the village, knocking on doors politely. Some people said they had no work at the moment. Others promised to tell her if something came up. Only one person, a young woman named Asha, gave her a few clothes to repair. Amina thanked her and went home. The job was small but still something. She worked through the afternoon, then washed a few more items left by another customer. By the end of the day, she managed to earn a little more money, but the total was still not enough. She felt the pressure rising again. Sunday arrived with a quiet heaviness. Amina woke early, knowing this was her final chance before Monday. She worked through the morning, taking only a few short breaks. She even skipped lunch to save time. By late afternoon, she had finished everything she had left. She cleaned her workspace, washed her hands, and finally sat down to count the money again. It was still short. Not by a huge amount, but enough that the school would not allow the girls inside unless it was paid in full. Amina put her face in her hands and sat silently for a long time. Her daughters were in the other room studying. She did not want them to see her like this. Her mind kept racing in circles. Where could she find the remaining amount? Who could she ask? The villagers themselves struggled with money. Her relatives lived far away and had their own financial issues. She could not take a loan because no one trusted poor people with borrowed money. She had no savings, no jewelry to sell, nothing valuable to trade. The sun began to set outside, and the sky slowly darkened. Amina stared at the coins again. She felt stuck. She had tried everything possible. She worked more hours than she ever had. She asked around. She took every job. And yet she still did not have enough. After a while she heard footsteps. Zuri entered the room quietly. "Mama, are you okay?" she asked softly. Amina quickly wiped her eyes and forced a small smile. "I'm fine. Just tired," she replied. Zuri looked unconvinced but nodded. "Our exams start next week. I want to do well." Amina nodded and placed her hand gently on her daughter's cheek. "You will do well," she said. "Both of you will." After Zuri left, Amina sat alone again. She knew the girls were working hard. She knew they were trying their best. And she knew they trusted her completely. It was nearly midnight when she finally made a decision. She stood up slowly, took a shawl and stepped outside. The village was quiet. Most homes were dark. She walked toward the small market area where a few shopkeepers sometimes stayed late to count their earnings. She hoped someone there might listen to her. The first shop she visited was closed. The second was locked. She walked further and saw a dim light inside a small store owned by a man named Hamid. He was known to be strict with money but fair. Amina hesitated, then stepped inside. Hamid looked surprised to see her at such a late hour. "Amina, is everything all right?" he asked. She gathered her courage. "I need some help," she said. "Just for my daughter's school fees. Can pay you back slowly. I just need a small amount. I have most of it already." Hamid listened quietly. He knew Amina was honest and hardworking. He also knew she never asked for favors. "How much do you need?" he asked. Amina told him the exact amount. It was not a large sum but not small either. Hamid leaned back and thought for a moment. After a long silence, he stood up, opened his cash drawer, and counted a few notes. "I will give you this," he said. "But you must return it within 1 month." Amina's eyes filled with relief. She agreed immediately. "I will return every coin," she said. Hamid handed her the money. "I know you will," he replied. Amina thanked him sincerely and walked home with steady steps. She finally had enough. When she reached home, her daughters were asleep. She placed the money safely inside a small box and sat down, finally allowing herself to breathe normally. For the first time in days, she felt a sense of calm. She had made it. She had found a way. Her daughters would go to school on Monday. Monday arrived. Amina woke before dawn as usual, but this time with a sense of relief. She prepared breakfast quietly, packed her daughter's school bags and sent them off. The coins she had borrowed from Hamid were enough to pay the school fees. For the first time in weeks, she felt that the struggle had a clear end in sight. She watched Zuri and Imani walk to school, their steps lighter than usual. She allowed herself a small smile before returning to her work. For the next few years, Amina maintained the same routine. She worked tirelessly, accepting every sewing, laundry, and repair job she could handle. Her body ached, but she never stopped. She remained determined, knowing that every shilling she earned, every hour she spent, was building a foundation for her daughter's future. Zuri and Imani grew steadily, excelling in their studies. They never complained about the long hours of homework, the strict routines, or the sacrifices their mother made. They remembered everything she had done, and they used it as motivation. Their intelligence, discipline, and determination grew day by day, and soon they began to receive recognition at school. Teachers praised their focus and dedication. They performed exceptionally well in exams, often scoring the highest marks in the entire village. Amina, despite being exhausted and busy, always made sure to attend school meetings. She spoke with teachers, checked assignments, and encouraged her daughters to aim higher. She never missed an opportunity to ensure they had access to the resources and guidance they needed. Whenever a new expense arose, books, uniforms, or school trips, Amina managed to stretch every coin, taking extra jobs or negotiating for small payments to make it work. As the years passed, their hard work paid off. By the time Zuri and Imani completed secondary school, they had both earned scholarships to attend college in the city. Amina had never imagined her daughters leaving the village for higher education, but she supported them fully. She sold a few old belongings, borrowed modest amounts from trusted neighbors, and managed to cover their living expenses in the city. Zuri chose to study medicine, determined to become a doctor and help people in her community. Imani, equally determined, decided to follow the same path. Amina felt immense pride and responsibility. She had sacrificed everything to make this possible, and now she saw her daughters walking the path she had always dreamed of. College was challenging. Both girls faced difficult classes, long study hours, and the pressure of exams. But they never gave up. They remembered their mother's struggle, and it fueled their persistence. Whenever they felt tired or overwhelmed, they thought of the nights she had stayed awake sewing, washing, and counting coins, ensuring that they could study. Amina continued to support them as best she could. She visited them in the city occasionally, bringing small gifts, reminders of home, and encouragement. She did not interfere with their studies, understanding that her role was to provide support, not pressure. She maintained her work in the village, still sewing and washing for others, though she reduced her workload slightly to allow for rest. Years passed, and both Zuri and Imani graduated with degrees in medicine. They returned to the village, now qualified doctors. Amina felt a mixture of pride and relief. The life she had dreamed of for them had been realized. They could now live with independence, dignity, and the ability to help others, something she had always wished for them. Zuri opened a small clinic in the village to provide basic healthcare for villagers who could not afford city hospitals. Imani joined her sister, focusing on maternal and child health, ensuring that young mothers received proper care and advice. Together, they transformed the village's access to medical services. Amina watched them work tirelessly, the same way she had worked for them, and she felt that all her struggles had been worth it. The villagers respected Amina for her dedication, but they admired her daughters even more. People would come to the clinic not just for medical treatment but also to acknowledge the hard work that had built this success. Zuri and Imani always spoke of their mother first, never forgetting the sacrifices she had made to give them the life they had now. Amina herself slowed down over time. Her body could no longer handle the extreme workloads it once did, but she no longer needed to. Her daughters could support themselves, and the village now recognized her efforts. She continued sewing occasionally, not out of necessity but to stay active and keep her mind engaged. She helped neighbors when they needed her skills, but it was no longer about survival. Now it was about community and connection. Seeing her daughters become doctors, respected in the village and the surrounding areas, was the ultimate reward for Amina. Every sleepless night, every aching finger, every moment of exhaustion had been worth it. She had transformed her family's future, breaking the cycle of poverty and ensuring her daughters had opportunities she never had. When the village held small celebrations for public achievements, Amina stood quietly in the background as Zuri and Imani were recognized for their work. She never sought recognition herself, but she felt the pride deep in her heart. The girls would often remind her, "Everything we are, Mama, is because of you. Every step we take is because you fought for us." Amina smiled, often with tears in her eyes, knowing that the fight she had endured every day, sometimes alone, sometimes unnoticed, had created a lasting impact. Her daughters were not just successful. They were now in positions to give back to the community, just as she had always hoped. The story of Amina and her daughters became known in the village as an example of resilience, dedication, and the power of education. Children in the village who once had little hope now looked at Zuri and Imani as proof that determination and hard work could change one's life. And Amina, the mother who had never finished school, remained their inspiration, the quiet force behind the success of two doctors who had grown from the struggles of a single, determined woman. Amina lived the rest of her days in relative peace. She continued to support her daughters emotionally, occasionally helping in the clinic with minor tasks, but she had earned her rest. She had achieved what she had always wanted. Her daughters had a future that was safe, meaningful, and full of possibilities. Zuri and Imani continued to grow in their medical careers. Over time, they expanded their clinic to neighboring villages, providing healthcare to communities that had never had access before. They trained assistants, held health awareness programs, and even worked with government health initiatives. They became role models not just for the village but for the region. And through all of this, Amina remained their anchor. She had been the one to fight, to sacrifice, and to endure hardship without complaint. She had done everything to make sure her daughters could stand strong. And in the end she had succeeded. Her daughters were doctors, respected and capable, and their success was a testament to the relentless determination of a mother who had never given up. Amina often sat quietly in the evenings, reflecting on her journey. She remembered the long days, the sleepless nights, the coins she counted, and the constant worry. But she also remembered the smiles of Zuri and Imani, the first time they walked to school with clean uniforms, and the day they returned as doctors. Every struggle, every sacrifice had been worth it. Her story became one of hope, a story passed down to younger women in the village. Mothers who worked hard but doubted their ability to change their children's future found encouragement in Amina's example. She had shown that consistent effort, sacrifice, and determination could overcome poverty and create opportunities for the next generation. In the end, Amina's life was a testament to perseverance. She had no choice but to fight every day, yet through that fight, she had shaped a future for her daughters that was brighter than she could have imagined. And her daughters, now accomplished doctors, carried forward her legacy, proof that the sacrifices of one generation could transform the lives of the next.